Morning Drive, brought to you by Golf Pride.
Welcome in to Morning Drive on the weekend. Gary Williams, very pleased to be with my partners, Matt Adams and Jaime Diaz. And guys, here's what everybody needs to know in the world of golf. Tournament officials have announced the cancellation of the 2020 LPGA Senior Championship. It was scheduled to be held July 30th to August 1st. Now, this has been canceled, but the Senior Major Championship will be moved to 2021. Meanwhile, on the European Tour, they have canceled both the BMW International Open and the French Open. And the Scottish Open, which was scheduled for July 9th to the 12th, has been postponed due to the continued threat posed by the coronavirus. Meanwhile, back domestically, the PGA Tour announced its plans Thursday to restart the 2020 season in mid-June at Colonial Country Club in Fort Worth. However, Commissioner Jay Monahan said Friday, none of it happens unless one thing is certain.
We need to have widespread, large-scale testing across our country. We are going to need to be able to test players, caddies, and other constituents before we return. But we need to do so in a way that's not going to take away from the critical need that we're currently facing. And we feel confident, based on the advice that we're getting from medical experts, that we'll be in that position. And our team right now is thinking about, we've reached out to all of our players. We know we have 25 players that are outside the U.S. right now, 35 caddies. We're thinking about what it's going to take in advance of a player getting on property to a tournament, to every single movement a player or caddy might have over the course of a week, and thinking about what can we do to make that the safest environment possible. So you're going to have, we're going to need rapid response, large-scale testing. The continued emergence of new testing formats and new testing protocols is very encouraging. And we, like other sports, are spending a lot of time relying on experts and identifying the resources that we need, again, to come back in a safe and responsible way. But I'm like I said, this is as important as the schedule itself, and I'm really proud of the amount of thought and energy our team is putting into this, and working with your team and other teams across the board to make sure that we get there.
All right, well, Jay Monahan sounding confident nearly 8 weeks out from that Charles Schwab Challenge, as I mentioned, at Colonial. Jaime, when you talk to players, which you have, you reached out to some, what concerns do they have with respect to the restart of the PGA Tour schedule?
Well, they're certainly optimistic, as Jay is, that this will all happen in time, as it's been designated, but they're also very aware that it's flexible, and that if it doesn't start in June and actually stretches to July, then there's a problem in terms of the qualifying points. And do you really have a full season? And if that's the case, and that's the determination, then I think perhaps they start talking about blending two seasons, this season and next season, as the standard by which the players go forward. I spoke to Peter Malnati, who's on the Player Advisory Council. He's going to play a lot, can try to get as many in as he can. And he knows, because all the top players are going to want to play more, it's going to leave opportunities for some of the lesser, echelon players to not necessarily the playing opportunities they would normally. And it wouldn't be fair if the season was that short if it started in July.
Yeah, Jaime, I think what you heard from Peter is pretty much consistent across the board with what players are saying on the PGA Tour. Gary, they're all being supportive of what the Tour's initiative is. They're being supportive of what the commissioner is saying, that they want to do it. They want to do it right. They want to make sure it's safe. I think it's fascinating that the first four events will not have fans on the ground at all, which only, I think, proves in the bigger picture that getting the events on television and reaching the massive audiences that they do, because if you look at in terms of crowd on site, maybe you'll have 100, maybe 200,000 people throughout the course of the entire week. And I'm not diminishing that's an important source of revenue and economic engine within those respective cities. But when you get it on television, it now can reach a worldwide audience in excess of 170 different countries. So I think that aspect is important, not only for the tour, but also for everyone's psyche, that we would have sports back again. We'd have something to watch in the realm of golf, and it's something that's going to extend that goodwill worldwide.
Man, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that, 150 to 200,000 people over the course of the week at a PGA Tour event is on the higher end in terms of the gate. I do think they're in a position to have large television audiences. I too was able to communicate with several players, Graham McDowell, Brandt Snedeker. Graham told me he's going to play the first 4 events. Now, he is a guy who won the Heritage several years ago. He's also an RBC ambassador, as is Brandt Snedeker. Brandt told me he's going to play the first 3 events. And, like you, Matt, and also Jaime, I think that they have great belief and trust in their leadership and in Jay Monahan, that he is going to be very vigilant about the testing and the safety precautions are going to be taken with respect to them going into every week, even though they are independent contractors and not going to be traveling as an organization per se. Now, guys, the news on the European Tour is not nearly as encouraging, considering the fact that the news coming out and then Keith Pelley subsequently coming out afterwards confirming the additional cancellations of 2 more events, not to mention the postponement of the Scottish Open. And here is what he had to say in a statement that he released on Friday. Well, today I'm informing you about the change in status of these 3 tournaments. My primary message to you as a valued fan of the European Tour is actually one of the optimism, because I am genuinely hopeful that from now on, the information I send you in relation to our 2020 schedule will be positive. We cannot emphatically commit to a start date because, as I have said many times, we will not resume until it is safe, and we are permitted to do so. We now have 14 weeks with no tournaments, but those 3.5 months are also the time where the global situation may well begin to show signs of improvement. There are already discussions centering around the easing of restrictions in several countries, and everyone is optimistic that these can continue. This window also gives us the opportunity to continue working behind the scenes on a variety of scheduling options, which will allow us to provide you with a busy calendar of golf to enjoy when we do resume. Now, Matt, Keith has got a challenging job. He had a challenging job before all of this, considering the top European players also satisfy membership on the PGA Tour as well. How much more difficult has his job become over the last couple of months?
Very much more difficult. In fact, it's become even more difficult over the last few days. Sources within the European Tour have told me that when the PGA Tour released their schedule for the remainder of this season and even into the holiday season, that it has put a lot of pressure on Keith Pelley, because unlike the PGA Tour that's dealing with one nation, Keith Pelley is trying to deal with different cultures, countries, and politics. And it's difficult for him to send out a message of unity to say, this is when we're going to start, this is where we're going to start, and this is how we're going to do it. And bear in mind, this is coming off the message that he sent not long ago that said, hey, European Tour players, get used to the fact that we will not be able to supply you with as many of the amenities as we had before. My contact called those frills, if you will. We might be talking about courtesy cars or what have you. He even intimated that purses may need to be adjusted. So while the PGA Tour, as you alluded to, Gary, is operating from a position of strength, the European Tour has got to fight their way back into this again, and they have some serious challenges in front of them.
Jaime, what will be the lasting impact of this situation on the European Tour?
Well, who knows the best, but they've certainly been in from the start on this, and especially because it's such an international tour and there's players traveling from all over the world with the coronavirus. That kind of situation is just makes everything so much more complex and dangerous, frankly. And so Keith has no choice but to play it very safe here. But the financial cost of that is tremendous. And I think, it's arguable that the biggest victim in golf of the coronavirus will be the European Tour. Let's hope it's not. But at the moment, he's really got some very high hurdles to clear.
He certainly does, and a lot of people who cover the professional game have all been talking about the vulnerabilities that the European Tour probably already had that they were dealing with prior to this situation. And you couple that with a Ryder Cup that is not on home soil, which is such a windfall financially for them. That's not the case this year with the Ryder Cup being in the United States. All right, you can follow us on all of our social media handles on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter. You can subscribe to the Golf Channel channel on YouTube as well. And we are just really getting started. We got more coming for you on this Saturday. And of course, you can catch Morning Drive 7 days a week. We're back after this.